the only things I care about is I want a set schedule. I don't want to work weekends, and I don't want email on my phone. If there is, like, I don't care what hours they are. If there's an emergency, call my cell phone and I'll pick up. But I don't want to just be stressed at home because I'm just worried about every ding being work. I know myself, so I need those digital boundaries. And I'm going to be looking for my next thing nights and weekends. So I don't want to work weekends. If there's an emergency, I'll come in. But I want to be able to schedule with whatever clients I'm doing.
You're listening to the 7-Figure Leap podcast. We're here to leverage rich relationships and smart strategies to take your business to the next level. Here's your host, Dustin Rieckman.
Well, welcome back to the 7-Figure Leap. I'm super excited to share a new friend with you, someone that I had one phone call with and was like, I got to have you on the podcast. We're wasting way too much great conversation for that other people could benefit from. So Nick Pavlidis and I actually met in Orlando at PodFest. And it was kind of a funny story, and I haven't shared this with him, but I was actually sharing a condo with John Meese, who's a previous guest on this show. And John's like, yeah, I got a breakfast with Nick this morning. I'm like, man, his name sounds familiar. I'm like, I think I know him from the 48 Days community with Dan Miller. And then I'm like, going about my day. It's like 3 hours later. And Cassie Shea, who's a previous guest on this podcast, says, hey, I'm meeting up with Nick for lunch. I'm like, wait a second. And so I kind of sought her out, and I'm like, I made sure that we met in person. And as Nick and I shook hands and talked for like 30 seconds, I feel like we became fast friends. We had this common connection with Dan Miller, who was pivotal in bringing me online when I was working a 9-to-5 engineering job. And Dan had actually just passed away like that week, I believe. So very powerful, definitely not coincidental that Nick and I met. And so he has an amazing business story as well. So we're going to unpack all that for you today. Nick, would you mind introducing yourself and just tell us a little bit about what you're up to?
Yeah, well, it is an honor. Yeah, it was less than a week after Dan passed. He passed that Sunday, and we met whatever it was, Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Yep.
And it was so great connecting with you. Right now, I run a handful of companies that are all focused on helping thought leaders. My big goal is to help thought leaders not need day jobs ultimately. So you and I are kindred spirits here. You can walk them through every step of the way, and I can help them connect with the right people and convey their message in a way that it builds relationships. And so basically, I've been ghostwriting for close to a decade now. And in doing so, I wanted to separate myself from other people who position themselves as ghostwriters, who merely or mostly position themselves as just selling words to people. And I put that in quotes because what I want to do is help people become successful. So I operate all my businesses with the principle that if I help enough people become successful, I never have to worry about my own success. And so as I saw thought leaders and got more experience with thought leaders, I've helped write more than 100 books at this point. I started noticing the things that they need to be truly successful with their knowledge, with their information. And so I've started by building relationships and eventually transitioned into relationships plus companies that I either own or control or work through, like ghostwriting, to really help put together the pieces that can make thought leaders truly financially and life and time freedom successful, so to speak.
Love that. Yeah, we're gonna get into Nick's businesses. I talk a lot about marketing flywheels. You know, I love flywheel effects, and I think that's a really healthy way to think about business. Well, he's actually built a flywheel effect among multiple businesses, and so I want to come back. We're going to dig into that for sure. Before we do that, Nick, I always like to dig in a little bit, start to understand why people are driven to do the things they do. And what you just said there was very clear, compelling. Definitely something that you've thought through, to get to this point in your career. But you didn't even start, I know, as an entrepreneur. You actually started with a whole different career. So you want to take us back wherever you feel appropriate is to kind of give people context on how and why you got to where you are today. Maybe talk about your legal career and some of the things in the past.
Yeah, I'll skip the twinkle of the eye in 1978 and I'll fast forward. It started initially, I was dead at the scene of a car accident in 1995.
Oh, wow.
And I ultimately came through, but I've always been family oriented, like even as a kid. And I don't have any, or I guess many is the right way to put it. Very few I have childhood memories because I was head on collision, dead at the scene, unconscious, no pulse. Like I came through, obviously. but I wiped out basically all my childhood memories. And so I had this experience. That was my senior year in high school. I had this experience where wanted to, I wanted to achieve, I wanted to leave a legacy. I wanted to build a family. And so I got incredibly focused on just becoming financially successful. So if something were to happen to me, my future family would be okay. Even as a 17-year-old kid, it was just it consumed me. And so I didn't do well in high school. I did super well in undergrad and ended up going to one of the top law schools in the country, similar to you with engineering. I became a lawyer, and I came out of the law school and got a job at a large law firm in New York City. They have 600, 700 lawyers now. It was about 300 when I was there. Made all the lists, top prestigious, this and that. And I was a corporate and bankruptcy litigator, eventually working my way up as an associate to have a corner office in New York City overlooking Central Park, which is unheard of for associates. But I was miserable. I was fighting with people all day. By that point, I had two kids and one wife. And
that's a good ratio.
Yes, it's important. And my wife stayed home with the kids. She had a career in fashion before we had kids, and when kids, my son came, she stayed home with the kids. So all of the financial pressure was on me, not as I had planned, but as I had anticipated through law school eventually. And so I just felt like I didn't have control of my schedule. I was spending hours arguing over things that didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. I was really successful as a lawyer, never lost a case. And then in 2013, I ended up meeting Dan Miller, who you mentioned earlier, on May 30th of 2013. And on June 1st, I flew back. I was at an event in Tennessee, Franklin, Tennessee, where he used to live. And I came back and just observing. I went to a coaching event there because I had listened to him on the podcast, and like I was just searching for something. And he was a career coach. And so I decided to sign up for his event called Coaching with Excellence. And I said, maybe I want to be a coach. I had no idea. I just knew I didn't want to do what I was doing. And so I got in that room. And when he walked into the front of the room, his wife, Joanne, walked in a few minutes later and sits there. And just for 2 days, I just watched the two of them sort of dance with each other. It was beautiful. And I thought to myself, I'm not in this room because I need to be a coach. I'm in this room because I need to be that type of a husband. And so my wife had been asking me to, and I use asking very loosely, to move back home to Massachusetts for 9 years at that point. And so June, and I kept saying, this is home. This is where we work. This is where, our kids are here. So June 1st, I fly back to New York City. June 7th, I quit my job. And I said, you know what? I just got to do this. August 28th, I purchased a house in Massachusetts. December 30th, we moved into that house. And I went from that job. I didn't just quit my job without a plan. In those 5 days, I did put together a plan that I was going to ask my one client who I was super close with in Massachusetts if they would hire me internally. And I knew I could convince them to do it. So I quit the job. And then I called up the lady who was running the company. And I said, listen, I just quit my job. She didn't believe me, but because she knew I was like Mr. Law Firm. And I said, I need you to hire me. She's like, well, it's June. I can't hire you. Now, I had negotiated with my law firm to pay me through the end of the year. And so because I anticipated her saying, I already set the budget for this year, I don't have a budget. So I said, well, you don't need to fit me into this budget. You need to fit me into the next budget, which you haven't done yet. Correct? Correct. And I said, well, the thing is, I don't care what you pay me. So whatever the only thing I did to protect my income was I trust you'll pay me fairly. And the only things I care about is I want a set schedule. I don't want to work weekends, and I don't want email on my phone. If there is, I don't care what hours they are. If there's an emergency, call my cell phone and I'll pick up. But I don't want to just be stressed at home because I'm just worried about every ding being work. I know myself, so I need those digital boundaries. And I'm going to be looking for my next thing nights and weekends. So I don't want to work weekends. If there's an emergency, I'll come in. But I want to be able to schedule with whatever clients I'm doing, or whatever clients I'm scheduling, nights or weekends. I don't care what time it is. You tell me what hours to work, just set them and I'll work my tail off. And so I took $125,000 a year pay cut for that job. And she said, great. And I started as soon as my, I guess, severance, so to speak. I'm the only, I eventually quit that job to become a ghostwriter. When I found it, it took me a year and a half to find ghostwriting after joining that. And then about 6 months or so to get my first ghostwriting job. But then within 8 months after my first ghostwriting, I was able to quit the practice of law for good. And so I quit that job about 2+ years later. And I kind of joke with people, I'm the only one who's quit 2 jobs and got severance both times.
This is a testament to your negotiation skills as an attorney. So that's
Exactly,
awesome.
right?
Oh man, that's so cool. There's so much in there to unpack, but I don't even have to you unpacked it as you went. Like, what an incredible story. Starting with a horrific accident as a senior in high school, and there is one thing I do want to ask because it's unusual. So as a 17-year-old, you wake up after recovery, and I'm sure you went through a ton of physical and mental anguish through that experience, and you lost most of your memories. Why do you think your response to that was, I need to go make a lot of money and ensure I have financial legacy? Because I think a lot of teenagers would be like, I'm depressed, or like, I lost my identity as an athlete, or whatever they were doing before. Like, why do you think it turned to financial freedom as like this like intense call as a 17-year-old?
Well, I have ADHD.
Okay.
And so I have never been very good at sitting still or stillness, not just sitting still like in a chair, but still in the big conceptual thing. And so my parents have a little sandwich shop here in Massachusetts. They've had it since January 6, 1976. And
Okay.
it's literally mom and pop shop. They're the only 2 employees.
That's awesome.
And so, yeah. So from the second I could stand, I would ask to be involved. I'd say, hey, I need to do something. So like they would put one of the old milk crates that don't exist anymore, perhaps, behind the counter in front of the register. And at 5 years old, I was working the cash register at my parents' restaurant, they tell me. And they wouldn't let me enter in the amount tendered even at 5 years old. So someone would get an 87-cent cup of coffee, they'd pay $1, and I would count back the change. So 1 penny, 2 penny, 3 pennies gets me to 90 cents, then a dime gets me to $1. Thank you so much. And then from there, I worked in like I just always wanted to work. I was always productive. I was always busy. And so the idea for me, and I have suffered some sort of, I don't know if it was depression, but because I'm thinking about it, I wonder whether it was. And my instinct has always been to create motion when I'm not comfortable where I am. It's sort of like stirring up the dirt at the bottom of the ocean to figure out what's next. And so my instinct, my personality is always to take action, which has certainly helped and hurt throughout the years. And so for me, like I just love the idea of creating. I've always been creative. I played music in high school, drums, guitar, bass. I sang poorly, but I did. And I didn't just play music. I decided at 14 years old to go to a recording studio back in the analog days and record a bunch of songs that I had written. So like I've just always been, I guess, antsy. And so I think it's me. But I love I just love creating things from nothing. So the ability to create, and it wasn't only financial, but the ability to create and to leave a legacy. I just wanted more for my life than, wow, what would have happened if I didn't come through in this accident? Would I've left a mark?
Well, I'm glad I asked that question. That provides a lot of great context about what drives you and where your values, come from, and the environment you grew up in. Even if you don't remember it, I'm sure it's still in there, right? Even though you can't recall it. So that's amazing. And so this is more of an anecdote for the audience, but I think it's suiting to, and kind of like the legacy of Dan Miller. I didn't realize you didn't meet Dan until 2013. That's very surprising to me. I assumed you were like the OG Dan Miller fan. I don't know when he actually started, but I encountered Dan sometime before 2009, because in 2009, I was on vacation with my wife. We had 2 kids at the time. We're working on the third on vacation, I think. But I was like a drink in my hand, laying on the beach, and I picked up this book to bring with us called No More Dreaded Mondays. And there's a reason you pick up a book like that, right? Because you're starting to dread Mondays. And I was 8 years into my engineering career. And in this book, it was a Dan Miller book. It basically just like unlocked this thing for me. I'm like, oh, wait, like I can actually have a creative outlet and do engineering, right? And it's kind of like what you're saying with this, like I actually am a very creative person, and I'm antsy as well. Probably do have ADHD undiagnosed. So that was my journey. I'd listened to Dan on a podcast, found this book. I came home from that trip, created engagemarriage.com, figure out how to do a website, started writing, wrote a book, started speaking. And like, it was my entry, it was my gateway drug in the entrepreneurship. Yeah. And I ended up doing side hustles for, a long time, like 6, 7, 8 years. I didn't take the fast action that Nick did. I think I worked for probably 5 years too long. But anyway, and then got to meet Dan, got to be featured in his Eagles community. And he continued to be a mentor and really continues posthumously to be a mentor. So anyway, that just a little bit of my Dan Miller journey, because it's something that Nick and I have connected pretty deeply on as fast friends. So I want to now take a snapshot of today and business wise.
Sure.
Maybe you can talk about all the businesses that you're involved in, just a snapshot of each, and then we can talk about how they feed each other in this flywheel effect. So I think it's really fascinating.
Yeah, so the business that started it all is called Authority Ghostwriting. And the idea here is I help you build authority through different types of writing. Most of that is focused on books, but books aren't always the right solution for people. Although I do have a sort of a proprietary process that I talk about. So it's proprietary, but I don't protect it very much because I believe in abundance. But a proprietary way of writing a book that doesn't just lead people toward long-term success, but also builds those short-term returns on investment that most people, when they think of sitting down and writing a book and taking however long to write it, and then are you going to publish it traditionally? All of you think, I'm not going to be able to make a penny from this book for a year or 2 years. I had one author who was a financial advisor. He was generating more than $600,000 a year in recurring revenue because of his book before we finished the first draft. And so, right, the idea is, how do you take a long-term project and bring short-term benefits to the investor, the author, who's investing their time and or money in creating that book? And that was one of the things when I started ghostwriting. I could deliver a book to people, but I saw this long-term thing. Man, they're just spending a whole lot of money hoping to get it as a return. And then I realized how much money people make from selling books, which if you're traditionally published, you might make $1 or so for a royalty. If you're self-published, you might make $5 a royalty. Typically, traditionally published books sell a multiple. So you end up making about the same perhaps in royalties, perhaps a little more even traditional, because they're in more places and you got more wind behind your sails, things like that. So I started working with people and I thought to myself, man, there needs to be a better way. So I created this process where we build relationship marketing, relationship building into the book writing process in a way that makes the book better, makes it easier for the author, and introduces the author to people that they hope to meet 5 years from now because of their book. But we use their book and the value of, hey, I'm an author writing a book, to get introductions, to turn cold outreach or even lukewarm outreach to people you have a connection with into real present day relationships with opportunities to make the book more successful and to get clients, to get speaking opportunities, to get sales before the book even comes out. So I started with that.
I mean, that's worth the price of admission and to this podcast, because I mean, as anyone who knows anything about me in this podcast, it's all about relationships, right? And so that's the whole reason I say podcast guesting is great. It's because it's a great way to build relationships at scale. It's a repeatable process that gives you an excuse to reach out and build relationships at multiple levels. And Nick's baking that into the book writing process. So it's no surprise that Authority Ghostwriting, which is you primarily writing books for people, has been super successful. And I want to come back to the ghostwriting process and some of the things you were touching on, but just to give people a more of a full picture real quick, what was next? Was Ghostwriting School or the Ghostwriter Academy? I know I got the name wrong.
Yeah, Ghostwriter School. Yeah, so I got my first ghostwriting project in December of 2015. That was part of sort of that history that I mentioned. And then August 1st, so less than 8 months later, I was able to hand in my notice to my day job to quit because I just kept building more clients. And you don't see me posting a lot online. I post a little bit on Twitter, X, but most of that is just automated. I just put a list of posts and quotes and it just does it. It just releases. But you don't see me posting a lot on online. But people started noticing, hey, this Nick guy he's getting ghostwriting projects. Like I'd mentioned it in a few places, and Dan highlighted, man, check out this lawyer. He's doing all this ghostwriting. And so people
And
in his
that's
community,
how I remember. That's when I first heard your name at Podfest. I'm like, I've heard this, and you have a unique name. And I'm like, and my mind went to lawyer and ghostwriter. I'm like, how do I know this? It was totally a Dan Miller thing, I'm sure. So
yeah, that's what. And so he actually featured me in 48 Days to the Work You Love, the 25th or 20th or something edition, where he told a little bit about my story in there. But so I started having people reach out to me saying, hey, how are you making money writing? And I'm like, oh, I'm ghostwriting. Well, how do you find clients? And like the simple solution is like, as ghostwriters, like I've written 100 books and I've been doing this for 10 years. I'm 45 years old. If I want to write 10 books a year and make an incredible income, 5 books a year and make a really good income between now and 75 years old, I only that's 30 years. If I want to do 5, I only need 150 more clients between now and 75 years old. And most of my business is repeat business and referrals. So like that repeat business, I have more authors who have hired me to write more than one project than who have hired me to write just one project.
Oh, wow.
And so like the idea is like, I probably need like 90 clients between now and I'm 75 years old. And so like, so I tell people like, it's almost like putting on a Super Bowl commercial, but Coca-Cola, like they pay millions of dollars to run a Super Bowl commercial, not to tell you Coke's on sale or it's, it's the most delicious drink in the world. Like they just have like polar bears going down. All right. And like, you don't even know, we know that because we've seen it a bunch of times, but you don't even know that it's a Coke commercial until the very end, after the polar bears get to the bottom of the mountain in the snow, it just says Coca-Cola, just to remind you that Coca-Cola exists. That's like awareness marketing, right? Just make people aware that you exist because they need billions of people. Like we need 5, right? Or like we need 3 or 10 or 80 between now and 75 years old. And so I tell someone asked me like, how do you get your clients? And I'm like, well, I just tell people I'm ghostwriting. And they're like, that's it? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, that sounds too simple. And I'm like, I know. And so like people started asking me, well, how do you make sure that you get their voice right? I'm like, oh, well, this is what I do. And how do you, and so people just kept asking me questions. And I'm like, you know what? There are a lot of writers who are struggling. Yeah. So why don't I put together this course? And I recorded these like 10 like videos on the business of ghostwriting that I figured out, the process of ghostwriting that I figured out. Because when I first learned about ghostwriting was from someone who was on a listserv. And I was like, so how do you get your clients? And she's like, oh, I'm on this listserv. And every time someone says I like goes to xyghostwriting.com, they send out an email to the ghostwriters and then we just pay them a commission. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like a good idea. And because what happens if that company just decides to change the way they do or get internal ghostwriters or whatever? And so when I did it, I secured the 4 walls of my house by having that day job with the boundaries so I can confidently make appointments with potential clients. I didn't know it was ghostwriting at the time, but it became ghostwriting. And then so I could take the long-term approach to figure out a way to not rely on, to sort of be able to go out and bring the business home. And so I just started telling people, hey, I'm building a ghostwriting business. And they're like, well, what does that mean? And I'm like, I don't know, I'm figuring it out. But I'm going to help read people's books. Have you written a book before? I'm like, yeah, I wrote a little baby memoir, but I'm going to follow I'm going to hear about what your goals are. And then I'm going to work my tail off to make sure you love your book. And the price is never going to be cheaper than it is today. So if you want to invest in the process, like your book's going to be, you're going to love it. And then I even had one person who's like, hey, I have this book half written. And I said, okay, send it to me. So I read it and I was like, it seems like a collection of blog posts. And she said, it is. And I said that slightly nicer than that. And she's like, so
you're not Seth Godin, you can't do that, right?
Yeah, exactly. She's like, do I get a discount? And this was in 2016, like during my first full year of ghostwriting. And so I'd written a handful of books at that point. And only 1 or 2 was done by that point. But I just looked at it from a consumer's perspective. And she's like, does the fact that I have half of it written count? And I said, you know what? I don't need the money at this point. At that point, I started to need the money because I had quit my day job, but I built up sort of a nest egg, I guess. And I said, how about this? You pay me whatever percentage of my rate that you want. And then just pay me the rest at the end. If you think I earned it. If you don't think I earned it, then don't. And she's like, huh, okay. So I had broken it up into 3 payments. And she's like, I'll pay you the first 2 today. And then the other one, it was at the time was $27,000. She paid me $18,000. And then at the end, I just said, "Hey, do you think I earned it?" And she's like, "Yeah, absolutely." And she paid me the rest. So like I tried to make it super easy to hire me. And so I had people asking me these questions, and how do you do it? And how do you structure it? And what's the contract look like? So I just put together that course, and one person reached out to me in October of 2019 who was a college professor. And he's like, "Man, I know you're putting together this course because you mentioned it to me, but I didn't have the confidence that it was actually like something helpful because it had worked for me and it made sense logically. And I worked in corporate law, so I kind of knew business, but I was like, is this going to help someone? I'm not going to have someone pay me money and not be helpful." So he's like, "Just please, just let me, like, just, I don't care if the videos are in a Google Drive or Dropbox at the time. Just let me in." And I was like, "All right." And he goes, "How much you want me to pay you?" I'm like, "I don't really care." He goes, "Well, I want to pay you something." I was like, "All right, pay me $300. What I didn't know at the time was he actually was in such a terrible financial situation. He was paying he was paying $500 and something a month in back taxes to the IRS.
Oof.
He had credit card debt up the wazoo, and he had to borrow the $300 from his dad. He's in his 40s. He had to borrow $300 from his dad to give to me. I didn't know that at the time. But within a month, he messaged me and said, "I've taken 22,000 words of notes. This thing needs to be out there. It needs to help people." And so that gave me the confidence to finally open the doors to it, which I did in April of 2020. And I've since welcomed, I don't push it a lot. Like for me, everything goes back in to the business to help more people through free training and then invitations to join. That I've been able to help directly several hundred people and indirectly thousands of people make money as writers, so they don't need that day job eventually.
That's
if
amazing.
that's what they want.
Well, it's something we're going to pick up on as we continue through these businesses. Is I didn't know that about Ghostwriter School. You told me about one of the ones you're going to talk about here in a second. But this idea of reinvestment, like Nick is very much a long-term thinker, and of course, you enjoy a healthy lifestyle and all that, but like you're really focused on, like you just said, you never take a penny out of this. You just reinvest it, make it better, grow it. It is literally a flywheel. So it's like each of these are flywheels, and then they're all pieced together as a bigger flywheel. And I feel like your whole life is like a flywheel effect, which is really cool. And what fortuitous timing to have this available in April of 2020, because I'm sure there was a high demand for at-home online education and people wanting to make money in new ways.
And everyone got a check from the government. So there were several who used that, whatever they call the stimulus check, to join Ghostwriter School.
That's awesome. Cool. All right. So we got you doing ghostwriting and leaving your day job. You spin off the ghostwriting school to help others with your methods, and you find it successful in 2020. So which business comes next? Because I'm aware of 4, and maybe those are the 4. But what comes next in the
the next was, I had been begging. So I had built a relationship with a publishing company called Morgan James Publishing for several years. They were the original publishers of .com Secrets, Expert Secrets, both by Russell Brunson, Jeff Walker's Launch, Brendan Burchard's The Millionaire Messenger originally published with them. So they had published several books that I really, really enjoyed. And I built a relationship with them where they basically said, the types of books we publish, we'll publish anything you touch because we know you're not going to send something our way that we won't, that's not a good fit. So like, we'll publish anything that you send our way. That we're not going to promise it because we're a legit publisher with a publishing board and make decisions, but like, just email us if you want. Like, don't go through this thing, and we'll give you preliminary yeses or thought or some advice or whatever. And so I ended up publishing like 3 to 6 books a year with them, some of my clients, and it made publishing super easy because maybe not the number one question, but one of the first questions my authors would ask is, what do I do with this? How do I publish it? Do I self-publish? Do I traditionally publish? And that helped me. I wanted to strategically build that relationship with them to say, if you work with me, don't worry about publishing because I won't take on a book that I'm not excited about and that I don't think is a good fit for this publishing company. And I can't guarantee it, but I can let you know by the end of the day if you got a publishing deal. And so they loved the relationship with me. I loved the way they work, and they have bookstore distribution, and they give their authors free ebooks to do whatever they want. I had one client who sold a package of 1,000 ebooks for $8 each. He sent an email to Morgan James saying, "I just sold 1,000 ebooks. What do I do?" They sent him a link and said, "There are 1,000 ebooks preloaded. enjoy. He made $8,000 from one email.
That's awesome.
So like, I just loved it. So I kept begging them, let me invest, let me invest, let me invest. No, 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 no. Or they didn't say it that way. But eventually in 2022, I got a call from the founder and he's like, hey, if you want to invest, I think I've taken the company where I can take it. I think I can grow it slow. And I'm not looking to grow huge and fast, but I would love to partner up with you. We love the books you write. We love the mindset that you take with each book. And so I invested in the company, and I don't really plaster it everywhere, but I'm sort of the CEO of the company, fractional CEO, basically, because I still run these other businesses. But I joined forces with them in 2022 with the vision of making Morgan James the most author-friendly, innovative, and tech-supported bookstore in the world. We are a book publishing company in the world. We don't want to be the biggest, but we want authors to join us and get from that relationship things they don't get elsewhere, and that can help them become more successful and sell more books.
So again, relationship first, relationship focused. But now you've got, so continue the journey. So you started your own ghostwriting, and you had a ghostwriting school. So now you've got not only you, but your students writing a lot of books. And you had this favorite publisher, and you'd seen their work and you really admired them, and obviously had a great relationship there. So 2022, you get the chance to invest heavily there, basically become the CEO and start taking the reins. So now you've got a very direct outlet for the books that are appropriate to be under that publisher. So you can see the flywheels continuing to form.
Yep.
And so then what comes next?
Well, the first thing I did with Morgan James is I announced and put in place what I call the Ghostwriter School Concierge Program, where students, it's not just, hey, we got a relationship to Morgan James. It's here's a link to here's a Calendly link to the founder's calendar. If you want to schedule a 30-minute call with him at any time, he'll take your call, talk about your books, talk about your clients' books, and hopefully you can build a relationship with Morgan James like I did, to say, let me just double check about this book. And we have since started publishing several Ghostwriter School students' books. And because one of the things that helped me close, quote unquote, more clients is, oh yeah, if you work with me, you don't have to worry about publishing because I've already got a pre-approval, like, mortgage letter or whatever. And so and I trained them on how to do it. And then so we had this great relationship going where we have more books coming to Morgan James. We added more value to Ghostwriter School because publishing, to be able to check off publishing. And there's self-publishing lessons and everything in there. And I help people. I don't just direct people to Morgan James, but finding the right publishing fit is great, and be able to have an easy relationship is certainly helpful and valuable to ghostwriting businesses. And so I have, and still when I took over Morgan James, I don't like how it says, but when I joined Morgan James, the rule was everyone gets paid but me. And so make sure everyone's getting paid. I'm not taking anything out of it from my investment. We're just going to reinvest everything until Morgan James is the most innovative, author-friendly, tech-supported publisher. And so we've had so many great pieces checked off for authors to become successful. You can get published, you can get written, but the marketing piece and the commercial success and beyond it, because Morgan James does marketing. We market to the bookstores, but the authors who make the most money and make the most impact are the ones who market their own books. So we do our piece, but we really encourage them, like, ignore what we do. We're focused on selling to bookstores. You focus on selling to customers, and let's help each other become more successful. So one of the frustrations that I had is we have bookstore access and we distribute to the bookstores. But what I realize is that the way the authors make the most money is through digital marketing funnels many times, where they sell their book and they upsell courses, memberships, things like that. And in order to do that, they needed to buy a whole bunch of books from us or from their publisher or from a printer if they're self-published, spend $5,000-$10,000, and then ship those books to a fulfillment house, and then sell the books on their website, and then ship each book again to the customer. And they might spend $3, $4, $5, $6, $7 a book and plus shipping, but they're $5,000-$10,000 in, and then pay another $6 shipping it to the customer. So they're like $15, $13, I say $10, $15 into their book by the time it gets to their customer. And so I started calling all these bookstores and said, hey, if you want to give my clients a little bit of a discount or our authors a little bit of a discount and allow me to make a connection to your technology, let's make it so our authors don't have to spend $5,000 buying books from us. Let's make it so they can just get their site up and running. And every time a book sells, they just fire that sale to you with the address. They will pay you. So that way we're not sending credit card information. The author's going to pay you for the book and you just drop ship it to the consumer.
Seems to make total sense. So I'm sure all the bookstores were like, heck yeah, Nick, sign me up, right?
I spoke to representatives from more than 200 bookstores. And they all told me it's impossible, it was crazy, whatever. So I did it myself. I was like, you know what? I'll figure this out. And I bumped my head all over the place. So I built this bookstore, and there is a bookstore live online that people can go and buy books. But the idea is I don't have to just process books on the bookstore. So I now have a relationship with Morgan James. So it's super easy for me to do with Morgan James authors. And it's super easy for me to do with self-published authors who want to send me the print files for their book, because I can create my own relationships with book printing. So that way I don't have to buy them on Amazon or buy them through distributors or whatever. So I have authors now sending me the money for their book, and it ends up, for self-publishing, it ends up being around the same price. I just need to print and ship it, and I'm printing it one at a time. And because I'm a bookstore, I have to sell it at retail, but I can give a discount. But even with shipping, it ends up being about the same cost to print it and ship it twice, once to the fulfillment house and then once to the customer. Sometimes it's a little cheaper, sometimes a buck or two more expensive. With Morgan James books, you also earn a royalty on those sales because you're selling it through a bookstore. But this way, instead of sending someone to Amazon and Barnes & Noble and getting Amazon a customer and earning just the royalty, you send them to a bookstore after you already collect their information and upsell, and those books get reported to USA Today and other bestseller lists. And so you're able to get the best of all worlds. You don't need to spend $5 or $10,000. You don't need to ship a book twice. You don't need to have any inventory. You just have your funnel up. You get your average cart value wherever you can get it, and you collect the information. Then you just put a card on file with me, or buy in bulk from me, and 100 at a time, 50 at a time, depending on how much you sell. And then I just drop ship it everywhere. And that way you're able to get those counted book sales. You're able to earn a royalty if you're published with Morgan James, the one that I've been doing. And so the idea here is now you can put that money into Facebook ads or into X ads or into LinkedIn ads or whatever it is to paid traffic, that $5,000 or $10,000, instead of having to buy inventory, number one. And number two, you are able to get started faster. You don't have to worry about 5,000 books to print or whatever. So there's just a lot of benefits to that. So now we have this sort of flywheel with the four main companies that I work with. Since we last spoke, I did start some digital marketing companies. Morgan James is partnering with a high-level reseller to create software people can subscribe to, even if they're not Morgan James authors, that have a handful of funnels and a newsletter template in there that they can just customize. So essentially, we're trying to help people. All right, what other barriers can we take away and make super easy for people?
Yep. Wow. Just fascinating. Like I've met and I already knew this. I'm sure people listening are like, "Holy moly, this makes so much sense!" Like, yeah. See, I mean, I don't even need to explain it, right? People can get it. Like, you do ghostwriting, you teach people how to ghostwrite. You get this relationship with Morgan James, so you have a publishing house and a concierge connection, which makes the ghostwriting school much more attractive. And then you own a bookstore now that can help with the distribution and drop shipping while still retaining the core like funnel marketing parts of what the most successful authors are doing to actually make money from their book. And now you're adding some marketing and software support and recurring revenue for helping with the marketing aspects outside of that with the book. So yeah, you and I are going to figure out how to integrate like the podcast guesting stuff into the picture, because it's definitely complementary. That's amazing. So love it. Love the flywheel effect. Love the reinvestment, the long-term thinking. There's like so much there. So this is probably a dangerous question and probably one that you can't actually answer very directly, but what's the future? Like where is this all going? You've built a lot of very impressive symbiotic businesses over the past several years. What's kind of the long-term vision, or maybe even 3 years, if that's easier to answer, for what you're doing in business?
Well, so for me, looking at what boundaries and what success pieces One thing is podcast guesting and sort of that virtual stages. So I love, and I'd love to continue our conversation. I am sort of putting together some ways to do that. I usually start with referrals and then partnerships and that, or things like that. I it's much quicker to start with someone you can trust and send people to, and then you end up working so well together. It's like, okay, what can we do together? Things like that. So a lot of my relationships have done that, like with Morgan James and Books Over, and so I have that one sentence business plan, everything I do. And that's if I help enough people become successful, I never have to worry about my own success. Had I not built that relationship of sending books to Morgan James, there's no way they would have invited me. And so things like that. The more immediate one is I am in talks with some content conference folks to officially partner together to be able to help some of our amazing authors and my amazing clients get on stages. And so the idea is, those are physical stages.
Right.
So for me, I'm one piece at a time, and sort of 5 years from now, now once we get the bookstore sort of on its own flywheel, so that way it's producing. So right now it's a virtual store with a very small physical presence that I don't advertise because I don't want anyone coming in.
Right. You just go there to write, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they're like, "Hey, I'd like to buy a book." I'd be like, "Seriously, just take one and leave." Right?
I don't have cash register.
Yeah, like if you want to leave a buck on the counter, that's fine. But the idea is once we get this up and running with enough of volume for the authors coming through, I'm going to copy and paste it. And so the idea here is in 5 years, I want to have bookstores, virtual bookstores that are based in 24 of the lower 48 states with 12 physical locations that are real. And I want them staffed by special needs folks. I have a real heart. And we have some relatives who have autism and Down syndrome and stuff. So I'd love to have one person running each location and supported by really cool people in the community.
That's amazing. Side note, my wife's a special ed teacher, and all of my kids have been involved with Challenger baseball and Special Olympics. And so definitely feel you on that one. And that's an amazing, I think we all like to live in the virtual world. Largely we have online businesses, but the idea of why would you want to have a physical location and all that comes with that? Well, that's a huge reason why, is you can empower real people in the real community, and in particular people that maybe don't get those opportunities elsewhere. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and I'm being strategic about it. So the idea is once this bookstore is generating enough money to support a physical location, we buy a small physical location, build it out, and not worry about the profitability there. But that'll allow us to have shelves that we control as a publishing company to get our authors there. It'll allow us to have our authors, my clients, be able to do book signings there whenever they want, to do events there. And for me, the real estate and the digital is going to support it, and the real estate will go up. So for me, it'll be great. So the idea here is every time we get enough to support another physical location from a digital perspective, we copy and paste what we did in a different place. And so 5 years, I want 24 virtual locations and 12 physical locations. 10 years, I want one in every 48 states, plus half of them to own their own physical locations. So then we can orchestrate national book tours, national launches, and because these books are going to count and they're all going to be reported, if we get books reporting from all different locations, we'll have one central location and be able to wherever the customer's located, we process it from that bookstore type of thing. We'll be able to really create true bestseller campaigns from legitimate sales that are national bestsellers. We won't do anything to sort of play fast and loose. But if a customer from Kentucky buys a book, I would love to have a Kentucky bookstore to be able to process that.
Yeah. And again, I love the idea of events. And then if you have an interest in these conferences, while we're in this city at this conference, we're going to have our own private authors event or a VIP book signing. There's so many cool things you can do with the physical locations. And man, it's I just want to talk for 3 hours, but we're gonna have to wrap this up soon. I do want this to be a side note. Maybe it's 60-second response. It's something I heard, and I did ask you if I could ask you about it, and you said you're comfortable with it. So this is not Nick trying to show off. This is me having a genuine interest in something that I think is really cool. And I was told by John Meese when you guys had breakfast, he's like, "Yeah, Nick, left this really generous tip." And it turns out he gives away $100 a day to different people. So I'd love to know why, how, and this is something I have a really strong personal interest in. But then I start thinking that sounds hard to do, actually, to do a different person every day. So yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, and it really is hard. Like the number one lesson for this is it's super hard. And so at first I was like, I have to give $100 specifically every single day. Like I can't give $200 one day. And then I started thinking like after the first month, I started like it was like 10 o'clock at night, and I worked all day and I didn't have an opportunity to run across people. So I'm like, do I take the car and go somewhere and just hand someone money, or do I just go to American Cancer Association and donate? And it took that impact side out of it. So then I sort of gave myself a little grace to say, I'm giving $100 a day, but if I know I'm going to be traveling one day and be in touch with a few people 3 days from now, then I'll give $300 that day. So the idea is it's really cool. It's a great lesson in generosity. It's a great lesson in trust and faith to know that to give first. And I've always been someone who's relatively generous. If someone reaches out and says, hey, I got to go fund me or whatever. Can you contribute? Or I'm running a race. I'd do it. But that was more reactionary. So I wanted to be more intentional and sort of giving first, sort of first fruits type of things for those who are so inclined from a faith perspective. But so I really wanted to be giving first. I wanted to make an impact on my kids, so my kids are involved. So we'll be in an Uber, and my daughter will text, "Hey, can we give $100 to the Uber driver?" It's like when they see someone who's working hard or whatever. So I put all these rules together. I can't give to anyone who asks. I can't give to anyone more than once. I can't give to anyone I know as part of that. I can give, but I'm just not, that's not part of it. I need to find 366, so happens to be a leap year this year. So 366 times to people. And there are times where I'm 3 or 4 days behind, and it just brings great joy. Like I went to the dollar store and bought a dollar thing, plus I bought 5 $100 gift cards, and I just went around the store. This is for you, this is for you, this is for you, because I was a little quote unquote behind, but it just brought great joy. So the idea is I love giving. It's really hard for me to receive when someone gives to me. That's just sort of a personal quirk. But I just love the idea of how can I, even when my kids were young, we did a podcast together called 5 Minutes with Dad. It's like a personal growth podcast for kids. And I would always pay them. It started when they were 2 and 4 years old. I paid them 4 quarters, and then it worked their way up to $20. And they would divide it even from those 4 quarters to giving, saving, spending, investing. So I really want to work giving into just sort of our fabric. And so it's been great. It's been hard. There are times where I do give to organizations, but I like something like a Heifer International where I'm sending someone like 3 goats with $100. So I'm just looking for great, creative, fun ways to give people. And I love just like the amount. I have a note here actually on my desk that I'm holding up right now. We were on our way on vacation last week, and there's someone who was on not a Make-A-Wish Foundation, but like something like that. And they announced a very special person going down to Disney. And so I called over the flight attendant, and I said, "Hey, I don't want this to be about me. I don't want you to tell them who it is." But I handed her $100 bill and said, "Can you give this to them and tell them to buy something nice for the person there?" And I got a note. "My dear, thank you so much for your support and generosity. God bless you and your family," with the child's name and family. So it was just like, I've had people in tears at Dunkin' Donuts with $100 tip. Like and I've also had people behind me saying, "That's awesome. I want to start doing it." I've had friends say, "Hey, $100 a day sounds like a lot." And it is. And I'm not, independently wealthy or anything.
Right.
Literally, the only thing that I use to pay for my family is ghostwriting still to this day. Everything else is back in. So, but other people are starting to give more, like not even necessarily every day, but I've had people text me, say, "Hey, I just tipped this person $100. Thanks for the inspiration."
I got to say, again, I didn't know about this until John told me. So this wasn't like Nick telling me, "Oh, you should give $100." But I've done some $100 tips fairly recently. I'm sure at least subconsciously because I heard about this. So this is really cool. So this is a like 2024 initiative. You just like, it's like a 1 year challenge that you're doing.
And in October, actually at Dan, I'm in a mastermind group, and it was founded by Dan. And before he passed, he asked me if I would help lead it forward because the members wanted to continue. So I essentially inherited it from him, at least from a leadership perspective. His family still benefits from it and all. But we were talking about big goals and things like that. And I've had this on my heart, and I just said it out loud to the group. Like, I've had it on my heart to give away $100 a day. And I talked to my daughter about it last summer. Like, I'd really love to give away $100 a day. Maybe someday. And then finally I just like, you know what, I'm going to do it. And like, even at the grocery store, I buy an extra gift card and just hand it. It's hard. Some people don't want to take it. So like, they're like, why? So like, that's why I
Yeah,
buy
they
gift
think it's like
cards.
fraud or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. So or it's a fake bill or something. So I buy a gift card, have the person at the cash register set it up, and then turn to the person behind me and say, "This is for you." And they always ask why, and I was like, "Why not?" And then I walk away. And so like, I've sort of got this reputation at the grocery store, which I don't like. I need to find a new grocery store, but like, the cashiers are like, he does this all the time. Like, it's
And
like,
they're like, he's in line, and then one of the other employees takes off their
yeah,
work shirt and
they're like,
stands behind you. And like, I'm gonna get this $100.
yeah, exactly. They grab like a pineapple and get in line.
Well, that's amazing. You've inspired me. That's just definitely something I want to do and talk to my kids and wife about, because I think there's so many cool things you can do with it. So thanks for sharing that. I know it has no relevance to like tactical business stuff, but I think, and this is how we're going to close too. So, business is first and foremost about humans. It's by humans for humans, and so it does definitely fit in that context. And so, Nick, I know I've taken a lot of your time, but if you can spare another 5-10 minutes here to indulge us. At this point in the program, I turn the mic over to you and let you teach something that's on your heart. Usually it's kind of a smart strategy about business or life, mindset, those sort of things. And I know you've already demonstrated in a large way how you think about long-term success and how you delay gratification and set big goals. And I'm sure this is even baked into your book writing process, but can you walk us through sort of like how you look at goals and how to actually achieve big things in life? Because you've made amazing progress in a very short time here since you've become an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that I do is I really don't set goals. I set visions. If you've heard me, like, I did talk about I want 48 of these, but it wasn't because that's a goal to have 41 in 48 states or whatever. It's because I have this vision for these book events and whatever.
Yeah.
And so I start with vision and work my way backwards. And I use that vision as a filter through which I decide what to do, what to say yes to, what to say no to. And so the idea here is I have this vision. How can I help thought leaders not need day jobs? And what are all the pieces they need? And then I'm willing to I set up sort of this life where I have a simple life, but I enjoy my life. I drive a decent car I enjoy. I have a house that we enjoy. Everyone's got their own bedrooms and stuff like that. So like, I'm very blessed in that situation. And then I just don't have this hunger for lifestyle growth. And so I decide to take this long-term approach to things through this vision. And then I tend to achieve more by sort of being consistent in chasing a vision than by setting goals and trying to work my way through, even work my way backwards through there. And so I see myself as taking small, smart, strategic steps toward the future that I envision, as opposed to the super tactical, step by step entrepreneur. And so what I would encourage people is to see their step, if they're taking their 7-figure leap to entrepreneurship, to be willing to see it as a 2-step process. A lot of times people, and I don't even mean backwards, I mean sideways and then forward. Perhaps when I was practicing law in New York City, I was making a lot more money, $125,000 a year more, but I didn't have the things that allowed me to make that leap. A lot of my friends quit their job who were similar jobs and said, all right, I'm going to quit my job and open my own law firm. I'm going to quit my job and do something entrepreneurial. And for years and years and years, they struggled because they went from whatever to zero and then building up. And so what I did was I found another job that paid me just enough to take care of the house I had bought and the car that I bought and all that stuff. And that gave me that flexibility and freedom to then build up and say, all right, coaching. At the time, now I coach authors, I coach thought leaders. But like at the time, I didn't like coaching. I was like, oh, let me try business coaching. And it just wasn't a good fit. So I didn't need to make decisions based on money. And so be open to the idea of, hey, if you don't like your job and you just ache for entrepreneurship, maybe find a different job that frees you up emotionally, energy wise, time wise, and takes care of you from a financial perspective. So you can take those small, smart steps towards strategic steps towards the future from a place where you're not killing that golden goose that's taking care of your family. And then the second piece is, it doesn't matter how digital your life is or your world is. The most successful digital marketers, they're successful because of the relationships they have and the relationships they build with people like you, for example. Someone who joins your group, They have a relationship with you and other people who are invested in themselves. And it can open the doors to way more depth and way more consistency and way like just so much more value than even the best marketing funnel in the world. Those should support the relationships and be driven by the relationships, as opposed to that's not the business. The business is not the funnel. The business is how you help people. And you can open doors. I always tell people there are three types of people you need to build a relationship in anything to be successful. And those are prospects, influencers, and gatekeepers. And prospects, and if you want an acronym to remember them, it's PIG, pigs. I don't love it, but I say it because it's memorable. The more pigs you have in your life, the more bacon you bring home. And so the idea here is whatever you're sharing content or talking or doing anything in business, aim forward. Don't aim backwards. Even when writing books, a lot of people come to me saying, "Oh, I'd love to write a book about this," and it's just a 200-page resume. And it's like, and when I ask them, "Well, where do you want to go? Forget about documenting where you've been. Where do you want to go? Let's write the book that gets you there." It just completely changes their mind. And so we put that together. And then we use the book writing process to build those relationships with prospects, influencers, and gatekeepers along the way. Influencers are the people your future prospects pay attention to, and gatekeepers are people your future prospects pay money to. And so the idea here is you write your book to your prospects, you create your content to your prospects, and you build relationships. Or in the book, you feature people, or on podcasts, you interview people who are influencers and gatekeepers, because those are the people who can open the gates to a 10,000 person email list or 150,000 person email list or a 2,000 person conference of ideal prospects because you built that relationship with. And that's when you say, oh, that's how I'm making. I had one client before his book came out, sold $83,000 in courses when he only had a 3,000 person email list. And it was because of the relationships that were sending people to him. And even the book, even the content, even the digital marketing, it will be way more successful with relationships than with ad budgets.
Amen. So, like, I mean, when I say kindred spirits, I'm not exaggerating. Like, if anyone's seen me present my most recent keynote, it's about building a marketing flywheel. Of course, using podcast guesting as the fuel in my case, but there's a key idea in there, and I use a cake analogy instead of a pig, but and I use slightly different words, but it's the same thing. It's basically getting those three layers of attention and building those three layers of relationships, prospects, influencers, and gatekeepers, to be consistent with how you described it. And I think when people maybe hear that, they might feel a little overwhelmed, like, but if you're doing it right, it's actually baked into the process. So it's not like this is something I have to block time on my calendar to go build relationships with the prospects or build relationships. It's like part of how you're creating the content in the first place, right? And so, and sometimes you can shortcut these processes by, paying for access to a mastermind group, for example, or paying to be at a conference and be in physical proximity to some of these people. But it's a beautiful thing. So any closing thoughts on this concept before we kind of wrap things up and let people direct people to how to find you?
That if you're focused on influencers and gatekeepers, the prospects part solves itself typically.
Yes.
Yeah. And so with a book, for example, how this might work, or a podcast, how this might work. But with a book, we say, hey, I'm writing a book about making a 7-figure launch. I have a chapter about when to quit your day job. Dustin, I know you've helped a bunch of people do that. I'd love to interview you and feature you in that chapter. Are you open to it? I already have a publisher in place. The book's going to be whatever. And of course, unlike the LinkedIn messages, like saying, hey, I think we can do business together, you're going to say, that sounds great because I'm leading with value. And now all of a sudden I have a message, or I have a relationship with a guy. In your case, you're both an influencer and a gatekeeper, because my clients, the people I help best, and you know what's interesting? The way I said that, and I hate to tap myself on the back there, but it's not the people. This is my target audience. It's the people I help best.
Yes.
The people I help best, entrepreneurs, people who invest in their future, people who are looking to make a positive difference in the world. You can probably introduce me to 10 or 110 or 1,010 people. And as long as I help you become successful and I show that I'm a person of character and who can really help people, like, the idea is you want to introduce me to people. That's the goal, is for you to want to introduce me to people, because I'm going to make you look good. And they're going to say, wow, how did you find this guy? And so the prospects, if you serve people well and you build relationships with influencers and gatekeepers by featuring them and helping them and whatnot, the prospect side tends to solve itself.
Absolutely. Yeah. And imagine just if it's not obvious, I'll say it out loud. So let's say Nick's writing this book and he reaches out to me and it's pure flattery. Like, you are amazing at what you do. I want to interview you and include you and feature you in my book. I'm like literally going to put your name and your business name in my book, and my book's going to do big things. And I've already talked to, they start name dropping all the other people that are already featured. Not only am I going to say, heck yeah, I want to be featured in a book. Well, do you think I'm going to want to share a testimonial or in the forward, or write the forward, or am I going to promote it when it comes out? Or am I going to feature it and interview Nick on my podcast when it comes out? Well, heck yeah, because I'm in the book, right? And it's such an ego play and an authority play and a credibility play for me. And it's so parallel to how we teach podcast guesting. It's like and podcast hosting now that I'm on this side of the mic. So, Nick, again, we'll have you. I'm sure I'll have you back at some point. Maybe we'll do some work together and feature that on an interview. For now, I want to respect your time and keep it at an hour. But these are usually like half an hour. So next steps, the call to action. It's that time. So Nick, if I know you're a pretty reserved guy, you're not big on social media, but if someone does want to go deep and they want to like maybe hire you to write their book, or they want to be a ghostwriter and find out about your school, or just connect with you in a deeper way, what's the best way for people to find Nick?
Probably just by emailing nick@authorityghostwriting.com. I very intentionally have the world's worst websites, so that way I want people to reach out to me through people as opposed to through SEO. I had 2 people reach out who I didn't know. They found me by Google, and I'm like, what did you Google? I need to take those keywords off my website.
That's awesome.
Nick@authorityghostwriting.com.
That's amazing. Nick@authorityghostwriting.com. I just got to chuckle because John Meese was part of our connection, and John has intentionally removed himself from all social media platforms. Yeah. So just like you and John are kindred spirits in that way. So that's hilarious. All right. Well, reach out to Nick. Obviously, he's an open, transparent guy. He shared so much here. He's just giving you his personal email address. So don't abuse it, but use it if it makes sense for you. And if you want to have a big impact in the world, that's what we do too. We work with the same people Nick loves to serve, which are mission-driven entrepreneurs who are looking to broaden their message, broaden their authority. So if you think podcast guesting and speaking and selling through your story is a way that resonates with you to do that, come see us. We're at 7figureleap.com. You can book a call on the homepage. We can have a quick consultation and see the best way to serve you and grow your business with some smart marketing strategy. So Nick, thanks again for your time here. It's been a complete pleasure. I've learned a ton. I'm sure the audience has as well.